Detroit Lions. We wanted to start here because this is already considered by many, myself included, the best team in football. Yes, the Chiefs are still undefeated, but they got even better at the early morning of the trade deadline day on Tuesday, acquiring Zadarius Smith and a 7th rounder in exchange for a 2025 5th rounder and a 2026 6th rounder from the Browns. This is essentially a trade that has been rumored / in the works, to my understanding, Steve, for the last 3 weeks, but finally happens. It is, I'm going to use air quotes, the replacement for Aiden Hutchinson, because I don't think you replace Aiden Hutchinson by any stretch, as good of a player as he is, but they get some much needed defensive line help. First thoughts on a type of move like this for a team in a spot that the Lions are in, probably much needed move, right? And we'll see what kind of addition Zadarius Smith is for them.
I think it's a great move. I've known Zadarius Smith for a very long time. He was in Baltimore when I was in Baltimore, so that's what I used to call him when he was a rookie. And even when I do it, still, he gets so irritated. Zadarius. But I think it's going to be a great acquisition for the Detroit Lions. But it's kind of one of those things. The one thing as far as like analysts and looking at it, Zadarius is a guy who can penetrate, get back in there. The one thing that I would say about him, if there's one knock, is finishing. A lot of the time he's been first to the quarterback. He doesn't always finish the tackle.
Okay.
If you go back and watch him, when all the teams he's been, he's always almost there. He's almost got the tackle for the loss, but just doesn't finish it. So that's the one thing that I would love to see his game start to take that elevated position. Just being critical of a dog that I know and love. And believe that this is an upgrade, obviously, with the Cleveland Browns, what they're doing, what's not happening. I think there's a great pick for Detroit. He's kind of worked his way out of a lot of situations lately, and so I just hope that this is not another team that he's only temporarily there and then moves on to someone else. I would love to see him be a little bit more stable in one organization because he's a hell of a football player.
He really is. I when you say the closing part, though, that worries me a little bit. Oftentimes, you want to acquire closers for playoff games, end of the season type of things, guys that can finish games. Hopefully, he can get to the quarterback and maybe finish a game for the Detroit Lions. And you mentioned the stability. He has no guaranteed money after this year on his contract. 32 years old, still a very good player. We'll see if he ends up sticking around. I think culturally he fits as well, which I will say has been very important as the Lions went around looking at the trade deadline. This is some locker room here, Steve, and you know that some locker rooms are different than others. Some are more special than others, and that was, to my understanding, the culture of their locker room is something they didn't want to mess with at the trade deadline because it is in such a great spot. And they went, into Green Bay, in the elements, with Jared Goff in his tiny little hands wearing gloves, and he actually threw the football well. It wasn't the end of the world, Steve. They played outdoors, and it was okay. He once again goes out there and balls, and as Kirby Joseph said after the game, we control the NFC.
That's true.
And there's some confidence coming out of that room, and I think I think it's true because Jared Goff maybe put it best, because we've seen it in every way and fashion. He called this team a chameleon. He said, we can beat you a variety of ways to play against, obviously, your strengths and know your weaknesses as an opponent. They can be physical with you. They can throw the football over the field. They got a defense that can go out there and make plays. Yep. Do you think that chameleon aspect, how important is that when comes playoff time and you got defensive coordinators and offense coordinators at the top of their game that you can continue to evolve?
I think it's unbelievable because when you look at teams in the playoffs, those teams have so many plays that teams are looking at and try to get a sense of who you are. Every game plan, every game you line up and watch the Detroit Lions, you get a different player that shows up in a different way that you were counting on or you weren't counting on. And I just love the way Dan Campbell is able to adjust. David Montgomery fumbles, or he, gets bruised. All of a sudden, Jahmyr Gibbs is the feature back. They got to throw the football. They can throw it. They can put 41 points on you. However they need to do it, they're willing to do that. It's a chameleon. That's called flexibility. That's called coaching, good coaching. The one thing, though, you're hearing a lot of buzz and we've talked about it, is what does Ben Johnson do after this? Does he stay or does he go to go as a coach? I think Ben Johnson needs to stay exactly where he is because he's also one of those guys who he sits. He sits in his office, closes his door, and he just gets down to all that funny, just wizardness of his offense. And I just don't see that translating into becoming the same type of head coach that he's been able to impact the Detroit Lions as offensive coordinator.
They better sell some cars. Ford better sell some cars if they want to keep Ben Johnson as that offensive coordinator, because I think if you want to make him turn down some head coaching jobs, you have to shell out a little cash to keep him as your offensive coordinator. I think you're spot on, Stephen, what they can do offensively, what they can do differently. I looked this up. The next time they play outdoors, just because this is kind of a funny thing that I think everybody wants to make a big deal about, because I think they're actually built like a team that would play outdoors, actually, if you think about it, the way their physicality is and the way that they're made up. They don't play outdoors until at Chicago 12-22, their next 6 games indoors, and then they have Chicago, and then they're outdoors against the 49ers and close out against the Vikings. I wanted to mention the defense is going to get tested down the stretch here when you look at what they're going to face late in the year, and then we'll move on off to Detroit, because they're going to have Green Bay week 14, which we know still can put up points. They put up a lot of yards against them this past week. Then they have Buffalo week 15 and San Francisco, if McCaffrey's back and they're clicking, week 17. I think we're going to get a chance to see this defense get tested a little bit at the end of the year before the postseason.
I don't know if the San Francisco 49ers is if they're going to actually test them, just because if they don't make any moves soon at wide receiver, I don't believe Christian McCaffrey is going to fix all the ailments for the San Francisco 49ers. We keep harping on CMC. I love to see him. I just saw him, so they got that 21-day window. Man, he looks in top shape. Him being in shape has never been the issue. It's now who's going to step up and be that impact player for the San Francisco 49ers that Brandon Ayuk was last year. The Brandon Ayuk that unfortunately got hurt, he was still getting back in the swing of things. It was not impacting the offense in the same manner. So CMC is going to change everything. I just don't think that is a realistic expectation. I just don't like putting all that pressure on one guy when you still have both sides of the football who are making critical mistakes at the wrong time.
So if they don't add anybody, do you think then Deebo, George Kittle, CMC, Jennings, Ricky Pearsall, is that enough to be a high-powered offense if they get into the postseason?
It doesn't matter if I believe it's enough. That's who the guys you have. Deebo Samuels is using this offense in various ways. He's utilized in the passing game. However, he's the playmaker. He's not the route runner, the precise route runner that Brandon Ayuk is. And that's not a knock. I love Deebo. I know what he brings to his name is Deebo. He's different players. Everybody has a role. And for Deebo to all of a sudden shift in that offense to become the precise route runner to run all of those routes, that's not his role in this offense. And it really hasn't been. That was the holdup. What his contract is. I'm a wide receiver, but you have me lined up at running back, tight end. You got me doing this. You got me doing wildcat. He brings so much to the table for that team. However, his role is not the wide receiver that runs those precise routes and how Kyle implements him in that offense. So they have to get someone who can be that route runner that adds to it. Deebo is the Swiss Army knife. That's not a bad thing. It's not a knock. I'm not coming at anybody. People hear me say stuff like this and Steve is putting down. No, bro, I'm just explaining each individual's guy's role and responsibility in the offense.
You're telling me all these guys are not the same in the NFL, Steve? They're built differently. They play the positions differently.
Yeah,
what?
Sure ain't that a shocker?
That's nuts. Oh, man.
Breaking news.